And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host Laraib, as we are here to break down week 7 of the NFL football season. A lot of stuff to get into. And, as we mentioned at the beginning of all these recaps, it's just another week in the NFL season. We learn a lot more about all of these teams, more games, more evidence to pull from for our analysis of these teams and the matchups going forward. So super excited. We're almost at the halfway point. We have an exciting episode next week when we do a full halfway season breakdown. But still a lot to get into in this episode as the NFL content machine just keeps on turning, Laraib. There's always something interesting going on. As many games to talk about. We did have two teams on bye last week, the Cowboys and the Bears. So no mention of them. Well, there might be, It's a fluid episode, but a lot to get into, Laraib, and I know where you want to start.
Yes, another great week for me in the picks. You could say maybe I'm rolling after maybe a slow start, but now 2 weeks in a row for me. And the big thing was, I picked the Packers and I picked the Lions. Those are two big wins. Of course, my big stinker of the week was picking your New Orleans Saints. So besides that, great week for me. I felt like I really had some good picks and I come out with the dub and I'm leading 4-3.
I really do. I don't really regret my two picks with Houston and Minnesota. I think those games could have gone really either way. It was just mistakes on both ends. And both those games came down to a game-winning field goal, basically. So it's obviously a tough way to go. You literally told me before, after me the picks, you're like, you picking the Giants is really going to come back to bite you. Don't you realize this is a Saquon revenge game? I forgot about that. If I didn't know that, or if I was privy to that, then I definitely would have made that pick. But besides that, I still feel good. I got 9 games right. Our upsets didn't hit, but we're starting to get a sense of this NFL season. We're starting to pick up on some teams, some trends. So I think it's going to be a lot more competitive going forward. But unfortunately, now you do have the 1 week advantage going forward. But let's go ahead and talk about last night's game, Laura. We had 2 Monday Night Football games. Awesome. One of them exclusively on ESPN Plus, which was good for me because that means I didn't have to watch it. Even though I did pay attention, of course. We run a podcast over here. But let's go ahead and quickly start on that game, Laura, because we have more to talk about in the Tampa one. But let's go ahead. The Cardinals beat the Chargers on a late field goal, 17-15. Not a lot of touchdowns in this game, but the ones that mattered were made by the Cardinals. Just overall, I think these two organizations are kind of similar, and these two uber talented quarterbacks who just really lack the requisite pieces around them to have high level success consistently. It's really been a theme of their whole careers at this point. 2 shaky ownership groups with the Chargers and the Cardinals. Cardinals win this game at home. If this was played in Los Angeles, I feel like the score would have been flipped, but just teams that are, very similar. Cardinals pulled out. What is your biggest takeaway from this game?
My biggest takeaway is the Chargers are still going to Charger no matter who's the head coach. Now, credit to both these quarterbacks. They both played fantastic, minus, the scoreboards that were there. But Justin Herbert goes for 350. Kyler Murray, showing what dual threat he is in the league. But for the Chargers, man, just shooting themselves in the foot. First drive of the game, you pick off Kyler Murray, and then that fat ass offensive lineman says, "Here you go, you can have the ball back." And then, the receiver, not Nelson Aguilar, but Jalen Rager, huge guy, right, for the pickup for the Chargers, fumbles into the end zone and takes a touchdown off the board for the Chargers. And boom, those 2 plays ultimately end up costing the game. And again, for this Chargers team, Justin Herbert, you guys know I love him. But when he's throwing the ball to Will Dissly and Fahoku and, Hayden Hurst is not playing and Josh Palmer and Lad McConkey are your 2 guys on the outside. I mean, just what are we doing, huh? This is a team that desperately needs help at the wide receiver position. Maybe they can go out, maybe look out for a Cooper Kupp to Los Angeles to the other
He's
team,
already there.
or or a guy like Deontay Johnson, who is more inclined to go to a Super Bowl winning team. But they came in this year and they really want to establish this run first offense. But in a game like this, where it comes down to your quarterback and need to make big plays, he just didn't have that guy out there to really go and score that touchdown. So loss for them here, but you're still feeling good in a tight game in a tight AFC. You still feel good about them for this season.
Yeah, and then flipping it over to the Cardinals, much needed win, especially in how competitive this NFC is. just all the teams above them in the playoff race. They really did need this one. However, one of their guys, one of their defensive stalwarts, Dennis Gardecki, he did go down with an ACL injury. He was starting to become one of my guys because I could confidently name another Cardinals defender. He goes down, unfortunately, and it's such a tough NFC that this was a much needed win at home against an out of conference opponent. But in the grand scheme of things, there's still a long road to go for this Cardinals team. And it's just this weird inconsistency that you get from them week in, week out, especially from Kyler, where it's like, I get it. Marvin Harrison banged up, really didn't have a huge impact in this game. The other weapons on your team really aren't a lot, even though I do like James Conner at the running back. I thought he played a pretty good game. There's just not a lot to be desired here. So good win. Let's see how they can build off of it. I just need to see more consistency. And for the Chargers, I feel like they're 1 year away to making real noise. I feel like, Jim Harbaugh wanted to come in and establish his identity being a powerful team, a run first team, really good in the trenches. And I feel like he's just one draft class away, one free agency cycle, because going in, this team was built on finesse, was built on speed, was built on the speed rushers, on the corners, in the back end. Whereas I think he wants to beef up the interior of both lines. And once he starts to, get his roots really dug into this team, I think they can start having long-term success. But for this season, we'll see what happens going forward. Good thing to know, Justin Herbert still is Justin Herbert. I know it's a different offensive system, but he can still throw for over 350 yards and look competent. But let's go ahead and move over to the next game, Laraib. The Baltimore Ravens steamroll the Buccaneers 41-31. That score was nowhere near indicative to how lopsided this matchup was. The big takeaway for me is Lamar Jackson is the current leader for MVP, at least in my book. 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think I saw some stats. He's 20 touchdowns and 0 interceptions all time in Monday Night Football, which is just wild. And then obviously he builds on his domination over NFC teams. I don't even know what the record is, but only 1 loss and over 20 wins at this point. And he just looked spectacular last night on the run, moving around, just destroying this Tampa defense. And this Baltimore defense was showing me something. They pick off Baker in the end zone, force him in a lot of mistakes. And, obviously Mike Evans going out early in this game did a lot, to really hamper this Buccaneers offense. But they stepped up well against this, running game, which last time we saw the Buccaneers, they looked pretty damn good against the Saints. So I am very impressed by Baltimore. They're starting to look like a complete team as we go further into the season. But what did you think of the Buccaneers in this performance, Rob?
Yeah, I think you got a spot on, Los, with Mike Evans. Whenever he went out, it really just turned the game right on its head. He had a huge touchdown on the first drive, and he was really, opening up that vertical game for them. And as soon as he goes out, you see this rushing attack kind of slow down for the Buccaneers. You see Godwin get double teamed a lot more, and that was kind of the game for them. Baker Mayfield, he had plenty of time. If there's one part that this Ravens defense struggled on, was getting pressure in Baker Mayfield's face, and he had all the time in the world. And then, he throws that costly interception in the red zone, and then another one to Marlon Humphrey later on in the next drive. And so it's just the Baker Mayfield experience, right? He's going to go out there. He's going to have some good throws down the field. He's going to hit Mike Evans whenever he's out there. Whenever his first guy goes out and everything starts to get boxed up, you see him holding on to the ball for too long, trying to make plays that aren't there. And that's where those turnovers lead to. And then that rushing game just really, it was really going early. I was kind of scared how well this Buccaneers offense was playing on those first couple of drives. And then boom, rushing attack slows down. Godwin is boxed up, and that's the game for the Buccaneers.
Yeah, and a few things I want to talk about with both these teams real quick. I want to get your opinion. Lamar Jackson, 1,800 yards, 15 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, quarterback rating of 75, which is second in the NFL, I think only to Jared Goff, if I'm not mistaken. But I think it's, as of right now, it's clear and obvious that he is the MVP of the NFL. Do you disagree?
Oh, not at all. We thought this was going to be the Josh Allen year, but Lamar said, nope. I got Derrick Henry on this team. We're going to continue that power run. And just the plays that Lamar Jackson had in the pocket. We've seen him make guys miss and then take off. But tonight, or last night, he was sidestepping, juking, and then throwing great passes. I think that's been a lot of people have been unrating about Lamar Jackson the past couple years. But now this is Todd Monken has officially been established here in Baltimore. It looks like this offense, even with Zay Flowers being banged up a little bit and no, true number one guy out there, this passing attack has been very, very impressive.
Yeah, and then before we move on, obviously really devastating injuries to the two best players, I would say, on this Tampa team. Mike Evans goes down with a hamstring. That's just been a nagging thing his entire career. That's really hurt him, especially in like a lot of these big state games where he has to miss or he gets out early. And this one looked bad. He was really struggling holding it. And then at the end of the game, Godwin dislocates his ankle. It appears the early indication is he will miss the remainder of the season. Just awful blow to this Tampa offense where those guys are really the two pillars that allow this offense to function because they add that element of verticality and they are just so good on the outside. And even Chris Godwin on the inside, taking big hits, converting big third downs that now you got to rely on a receiver group that leaves a lot to be desired. So, long-term outlook for the Buccaneers, this really, really hurts their ceiling. After the past few games where they looked very dominant offensively, you say, okay, this team could really make some noise in the NFC playoff picture. And it seemed like they were starting to distance themselves in the division as well. But after this, I mean, they play their next game against Atlanta again after that tough overtime loss against them only 2 weeks ago. That if Atlanta sweeps you, then all of a sudden your divisional odds are shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a long road for them. Now, they're still, like some other teams like the Chargers looking for a wide receiver, the Chiefs are looking for a wide receiver. Throw the Buccaneers into that mix now, looking out for some of those big names that might be in the free agency market because this still is a salvageable season, right? Everyone in the NFC South lost this year, or excuse me, lost this week. And so, the division's still open for anybody. So you go ahead and make, one trade for wide receiver and still, you have Baker Mayfield. He's going to make those plays. And the rushing attack, besides, Rashad White, they have some thumpers back there in the backfield. So, there's still a chance for them and there's still gonna be opportunity. It just depends on what Baker Mayfield looks like when those two guys are out for him.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead, Laraib, and let's go to our main segment of today's episode. We're bringing back an oldie and a goodie. It is cap or no cap, where we're gonna throw some big takeaways at each other from this past week's action, and we'll just say cap, it's BS, you're making stuff up, or no cap, hey, there's some truth to that. Usually it's hot takes, overreactions, but I will start, Laraib. Cap or no cap, after a tough win against divisional opponent Minnesota, the Lions are clearly the team to beat in the NFC.
No cap. I mean, they have been playing outstanding football. Shout out Jared Goff. I think he should be top 3 in MVP race. Coming into this game, a lot of people had questions, how is he going to fare against this Minnesota blitz that, Brian Flores is going to dial up? And he just tore them apart, so hitting Amon-Ra on big plays, hitting Jameson Williams on big plays, who's going to be out for 2 weeks, by the way. But Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery look like the premier running back duo in the NFL, taking over that game. And even when we saw Montgomery go out, it was Jahmyr Gibbs just toting the rock, getting those big yards, catching those big passes, and boom, boom, boom. This Lions team was exploding offensively. And when that team needed to make a stop late in the fourth quarter, the Vikings needed 1 or 2 first downs to ice the game. They all stepped up, and Brian Branch had 2 big interceptions in this one. And it really looks like they're playing the most complete football. And that's the word I think we want to describe this Lions team with, is complete on both sides of the ball. Even without the Aiden Hutchinson, they still played fantastic defense. Offensive line is going to be one of the best units in the NFL. And overall, they're just a complete, well-rounded team. I think they are the team to beat in the NFC.
Yeah, I still think they have some holes. Like they definitely do need an extra pass rusher via trade or however you're going to get it, because there were times in that game when they were up by 10 points in the third quarter where it's like, if Hutchinson was there or if you had something, just supplementary pass rush, then I really feel like they could have just, put their foot on the necks of the Vikings and really didn't let them back into the game. But overall, I mean, you mentioned how amazing Jared Goff's been playing. 3 straight games with over 140 passer rating or QBR, whatever made up stat you want to go with that you can't calculate sitting on your couch. But he's just been playing excellent football. He doesn't really allow this team to have slow starts. He has been playing behind the rushing game because that was the head scratching thing the first 3 weeks where it was like, why aren't they running the ball? Or why aren't they running the ball as much as they should? They have this awesome offensive line. They have Montgomery and Gibbs. Why Jared Goff is clearly more comfortable playing with play action, playing with a running game, and just his ability to maneuver that. They're definitely relying a lot more on these guys. So overall, the holes are not apparent really wherever. I would like to see them get, Laporta, who had such a good season last year. Now, obviously the offense has been clicking, but I'd like to see him get a little more involved, especially in the red zone where they had some struggles early on in the year. But if you have these guys like Montgomery and Gibbs who are just consistently moving the chains, consistently getting you really tough yards, then you really don't need a lot from Jared Goff, but you're getting it from him, and that's what's making this offense look unstoppable. Just especially against Brian Flores. I picked the Vikings to win that game because I thought Brian Flores would bring a lot of pressure, force Goff into some mistakes, and he stood in the pocket and he made tough throws over and over again. And I still think the Vikings defense showed me a lot. I still think this Vikings team is a legit team, and this win is nothing to sneeze at against a divisional opponent in their building. Just really, really tough performance from the Lions, and definitely a lot of optimism moving forward.
Yeah, and so let's go ahead and move on to another cap or no cap, Lewis, another NFC team. I want to ask you, cap or no cap, the San Francisco 49ers will miss the playoffs.
Oh man, Laraib, I'm going to say cap because this is still the 49ers, still Kyle Shanahan, and they still have talent. But obviously, not despite the loss, and it was a crushing defeat against the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, the Super Bowl rematch, a game that they were clearly amped for, really couldn't get going. It seemed like Deebo Samuel really wanted to play, but he was just not healthy enough to go out there. He left pretty early in the game. But really, it's the injuries that are really starting to keep up with this old team. That old expensive team. Obviously, we're going into week 8 and still no indication of whether or not Christian McCaffrey is going to join this team at any point during the season, which is a scary thing because that directly impacts their red zone efficiency and how good they've been on offense all season long. But the big thing to me is obviously just the wide receiver room injuries. No Juwan Jennings in this past game, even though he should be back. But, losing Brandon Ayuk for the season with an ACL, that's obviously tough, even though he really wasn't playing that well for the entire season. But the alarming thing to me, really, obviously Purdy's had some mistakes, and without these guys, I'm not too concerned about the offense. I think they'll be able to run the ball. I just think they faced a really good defense. I think this offense will be good enough to, at least make the playoffs. The really concerning thing to me is this rush defense, Laraib, and this defense and just in totality. The Chiefs with Kareem Hunt were really just moving the ball at will. It didn't feel like they got a ton of pressure, and that's kind of been the thing all season long that we've been talking about is guys like Nick Bosa, they're having to send a lot more blitzes. They're in the top half of the NFL in blitz percentage this year, when really their whole bread and butter the past few years is getting home with 4 guys. Losing Javon Hargraves and not having that extra pass rusher. Because even last year, Chase Young was a good pass rush specialist on the outside of Nick Bosa in those big games, where you really aren't getting that from a lot of sources. Leonard Floyd just hasn't been that spectacular this season, and he's just a smaller guy in general, so they're able to get run on. And I'm just going to go ahead and look forward at this 49ers schedule, and then I'll hand the ball back off to you, Laura. But this is a tough stretch of games that they're going into now. Obviously, they lose to the Chiefs, but now they play, the Cowboys again at home. That's a game against the Cowboys coming off a bye. I don't know how good the Cowboys are, but that's just not – it's not going to be an easy game. Two teams with a lot of history. The Cowboys have been circling this one on the schedule for a while. But then you have at Tampa, home for the Seahawks, at the Packers, at the Bills, home for the Bears, home for the Rams, and then some easier ones until you play the Lions in Week 16. So just a brutal schedule going forward for the 49ers, and they're not getting any healthier. So I don't know what to think of this team. It's been weird vibes ever since, the preseason training camp. And now we're at this point, Trent Williams getting in fights at the end of the games. It just seems like Kyle Shanahan is losing control of this team. I do still think they're going to be a playoff team because of just the talent and the infrastructure and what this team, how they built. But it's looking grim, Larob.
This one is right down the middle for me, 50-50. And I don't want
Go
this to be
for it.
clipped for me later in the
Go
season, but
for
you know
it.
what? Screw it. I'm going to say no cap. This 49ers team will miss the playoffs. And here's the reason. Here's the reason why. It's that tough ass schedule, really. You know, like you mentioned, even that game when they, you know, later on in the season where you think it gets easy, you know, they play the Lions and the Cardinals. They still have to play the Dolphins before that, the Rams who might be still in it, the Bears who they might be sneezing at, the Bills and the Packers. And don't count out the Seahawks team just yet. I think this is one of the toughest schedules to play in the entire NFL going forward. Now you lose Brandon Ayuk for the season, and Deebo Samuel with pneumonia. He had fluid in his lungs as he went to the hospital. He still has a chance not to play this week. And then Christian McCaffrey, the thing that's been looming them the entire season since opening night. He, probably looking at a return for him maybe week 10 after their bye. But it's injuries and a tough schedule and just a team who has not looked right all season long. Now, the one saving grace they do have is for the Seahawks, who they're also competing for the division. They have a really tough schedule as well. And then currently, as it stands, the entire NFC North is in the playoffs. You would expect a team like the Bears, maybe, do they take a step back? Or, I mean, I can't count out the Packers or the Vikings. I think those two teams make it. And
Well,
so,
and the thing is, all those teams really haven't played each other yet. We saw our first divisional game this week with the Lions and the Vikings. So those teams will still be able to beat up on each other. And like you mentioned, the Seahawks have a tough schedule. So the division is still up there for grab, even if they can't get a wild card spot. So there's multiple routes here.
yeah, the routes are there, but every single week you start losing more and more trust in just the way they've been playing. The leads that they've blown, to the Rams and the Cardinals is just a team that doesn't feel complete. And then you hit it also on the defense, really just a rushing attack and not generating that much pressure. It's one thing when you're facing Stone Forsyth on Thursday Night Football. It's
He's
another
still
thing
there.
when you're facing that Chiefs offensive line. And so, we'll see. It's gonna be, I think this is gonna be real close. Their best shot, in my opinion, is again obviously winning that division because those wild card spots are gonna be really tough.
Stone Forsyth was his highest pass blocking grade of this season against Atlanta last week. He heard the slander. He's still awful. But let's go ahead, Laraib, and let's move on to my cap or no cap, where last Sunday night, Russell Wilson came in for the Steelers, and we were like, this just is a weird matchup. Justin Fields' legs against this Jets defense, which isn't good against the ground game. Like, it was just like, why are we throwing Russ in here? But boy, did he shut me up. He went out there and looked awesome. 3 touchdowns, over 250 passing yards. First time the Steelers have scored over 35 offensive points in a game since Ben Roethlisberger was the quarterback. So things are starting to turn around. Laura, cap or no cap, Russell Wilson should be the full-time starter going into the rest of the season.
I think no cap, Lewis. He just brought in an extra element. What we were talking about, if the Steelers were going to win this game, which I mean, it didn't take too much, but it was going to be that vertical threat. George Pickens kind of disinterested when Justin Fields was his quarterback. They really didn't have that deep threat to kind of make those safeties move down the field a little bit and open up that run game. And that's what they were able to do in this one. We saw that trademarked Russell Wilson moonball. Now they didn't always fit perfectly into the breadbasket. George Pickens had to grab him off the cornerback,
Contort.
grab him off the cornerback shoulders sometimes, but it got the job done. And we saw that patented Russell Wilson, play action, boot out of the pocket, throwing those great passes to, touch passes to his tight end. And this offense was humming, Lewis. I mean, now this Jets defense has kind of struggled the past couple of weeks after losing Robert Saleh. And so that's one thing, but it really looked like their offense was starting to click. They were, slow to start. A couple of boos were coming down from the stands. But once they got that run game going, Russell Wilson moonball, and it really looked like they had something going. And so I think it might not be the case, might not be completely closed. We see Russell Wilson, throw a couple ducks, 2-3 interception game. Justin Fields is going right back in. But from what I saw in this game, I think he continues as a starter.
Yeah, I agree with you, Larob. And you hit everything that I was going to hit on, just the element of verticality. And I feel like there's, when we talk about what opens up the run game, it's like, yes, a running quarterback does open up a run game because it's that added element of, the read option of I could go this way or this way, and it puts the defense in a bind where they don't want to fully commit to the running back or the quarterback. But if you add an element of verticality, that also opens up the run game because it's less guys in the box. It's that threat of the safeties are playing a lot further back. The corners are playing further back. So it's more room to operate for the run game. We saw Najee Harris. He keeps putting together these 100 rushing yard games, and he's looked very capable on the ground. They get Jalen Warren back last week. He has a pretty good run game. And a game that we both thought the Jets would win based off their defense and Russell Wilson. He looked extremely sharp. He even threw in a rushing touchdown to add on to it. And it was just, Russ, he's been fairly maligned the past few years. I want to get that out of the way. He has not been playing like the Russ we've seen before. And I'm not saying necessarily this game is a sign of, things to come for how awesome he's going to be the rest of the season. I still think this Steelers offense has some question marks to their offensive line and some of the other weapons besides George Pickens on the outside. But just what Russell Wilson gives you in terms of just a full field attack is a lot better than what Justin Fields was giving you. Even though I feel like Justin Fields still gives you competent quarterback play, it just seems like Mike Tomlin's in a situation where this is just a good problem to have. And neither of these guys, they're really tied to financially at all. I mean, I think they're combined making $3 million on the cap. So you do not have any responsibility towards either of these guys going forward. So I get it from Mike Tomlin. It's like offense hasn't been exactly what we expected. Let's put Russ out there. Even though Justin Fields was 4-2, let's see what we got. And it looked pretty good to start. So obviously you keep rolling with Russ. And if you need to change, you have that ability. But I do think Russell Wilson will continue to be the starter because of the elements he brings you. So I think for Steelers fans, they should be pretty excited that at least they have a competent offense to complement this defense.
Well, Lewis, we know that schedule really, really gets tough down the stretch. Still have to play the Bengals twice. Still have the Chiefs and the Ravens back to back later on in the season.
Right.
And so the case is not fully closed, but the way Russell Wilson played, I think he's well on his way to being the full-time starter for the rest of the year, Lewis. But let's go ahead and move on to our final cap or no cap. I want to ask you, the AFC really tight this year, but the 7th seed will have 9 wins this year, cap or no cap?
No cap, Laraib. And you know what? When we were going into the year, we were looking at the AFC. It's like, man, there's so many good teams. It's going to be so difficult to find, 7 playoff teams because you're going to have these teams. Well, I think in reality, the top of the AFC is fantastic. I feel like we have our divisions winners set. We have Houston in the South. We have Buffalo in the East, Baltimore in the North, and obviously the Chiefs in the West. So then it's like, well, after that, who? Well, the Steelers are 5-2, and they've looked pretty solid. But as you mentioned, they still have a gauntlet to go through at the end of the season, so that's not going to be easy. And besides that, it's like, who's really sticking out to you right now? I mean, the Broncos have picked up some impressive wins recently, and the Bengals are starting to look back on track, but neither of these teams are really that convincing. And as it stands right now, Rob, I'll just go ahead and say, you had the 4 divisional winners. You have Pittsburgh at 5. Then you have Indy at 4-3, Denver at 4-3. Those are only the other 2 4-win teams right now in the 6 and 7 spot. And then it's notable 3-win teams. You have the Chargers, the Bengals. And besides that, a lot of 2-win teams, a lot of teams with big question marks going forward. So I really feel like to get that 7th spot in the AFC, 9 wins is going to do it. And who's going to come out of that? I just can't see the Colts really sustaining. They'll just find a way. Just always with this Colts team, they're going to be in it the final week of the season, usually on the the losing end to get into the playoffs. But there just hasn't been a lot of impressive football. Even the Bengals, who I know we both really like, just really sloppy performance against the Browns last week in a game where there's a ton of chaos and turmoil on the Browns sideline. And then for the Bengals, now you play a game at Philly next week and your schedule is still pretty difficult. So I feel like 9 wins is going to do it for the AFC in a division and a conference that we expected a lot more from entering the season.
Yeah, I'm also going to go no cap. I would even venture to say, maybe 8 wins could do it, dare I say. I mean,
8-1.
Yeah, for that 7th seed, the Broncos sitting there currently, and it just kind of depends on how much you trust some of these teams. And this is a conference that likes to beat up on each other. They're all going to play tough games, but when it comes down to it, who is really going to stand out? I really think who's outside looking in right now. I like the Bengals, of course, 3-4, but do not count out the Miami Dolphins sitting right there at 2-4. If Tua comes back this week and they start winning some games with Tyreek Hill and Jan Waddle, where they combined 2 catches last week, I really feel like they're a team that can sneak in. Just how bad, we'll get into some of our cross-off teams, just how bad this Colts team has been playing. And the Broncos, how much do you really trust in Bo Nix? And then the Chargers, a team that lacks, an offensive talent besides Will Dissly and J.K. Dobbins, is just going to be tough for them. And so, yeah, I think 8 or 9 wins really does it.
Well, you referenced it, so let's go ahead and hop right into it. Our next segment, we will be crossing off teams, and it's going to be savage because I'm saying 8 teams right now. We each picked 4. We didn't tell each other which 4 though, so it might be a shock once we start getting past some of the obvious cross-offs. But 8 teams at this point of the season is definitely a risk to start crossing teams off, Laraib. But let's go ahead and start. I'm going to give you the first pick. Who is your first team you're crossing off? And when I say cross off, I'm saying will not make the playoffs this season.
I mean, this is just a gimme right here. Give me Carolina. Turmoil with owner, turmoil with who's going to be playing quarterback, and just turmoil on that defense. You lose 37, you give 37 points to Marcus Mariota. And after Jaden Daniels goes down, I mean, they're clearly the worst team in the NFL. Carolina is an easy cross off. You could have told me cross off in week 1.
Carolina with a minus 133 point differential on the season. Next closest is my team that I'm selecting with a minus 76. So that's just to show you how awful Carolina has been this season. But my team is the New England Patriots. A team you picked to beat the Jaguars in London last week, who we maybe saw some exciting stuff from Drake May. I'm happy they transitioned to Drake, and I think, I've seen some good things from him so far. No turnovers in that game against Jacksonville. But this offensive line is utter garbage. They can't run the ball. They can't protect Drake May. I really am scared for him for the rest of the season. I really hope he stays healthy. And this defense just way too injured, way untalented. Easy cross off for me.
Good one. Next one, I have the Tennessee Titans, a team that I was really, really high on going to the season. Team that, I thought would be sneaky in their division.
Then they went to Chicago.
Give me the Tennessee Titans. Just awful. The defense slowly breaking down week by week. When you have Mason Rudolph in at quarterback, there's just not much you can do offensively. And so give me the Titans as my cross off.
All right, next team for me, a pretty easy one. It's going to be the Cleveland Browns here, Laraib. I just think, I'd like to say, you lost your starting quarterback, your season's over. Well, if anything, this is what Browns fans have been clamoring for. But even if Jameis gets to start next week and you have some juice offensively, 1-6 is just way too big of a hole that you dug yourself into. And even then, there still are problems with this team. You get Nick Chubb back, which is fun. But I just think, 5 games under 500 this point in the year, way too big of a hole to climb out of. So Browns are crossed off for me.
All right. And so that will do all of our 1-win teams. And I'm going to continue to go chalk. Give me the 2-5 Giants. So Daniel Jones at the quarterback. The defense, they've played really well the past couple of weeks. But when Daniel Jones is missing open throws, Malik Neighbors is getting triple teamed out there, and they're not able to move the ball that well. I think this Giants team is an easy cross off, especially when they're playing in that really, really tight division.
After that Seattle win that just completely threw my radar off on the Giants, I was like, man, they have a good pass rush. They have exciting players on offense like Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy. And then they just get clobbered at home. And Daniel Jones is just so incompetent. And Dayball already came out and said he's going to be the starter against Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football. So I'm looking at a 6th loss on their schedule. Another 2-win team that I will be crossing off will be the Las Vegas Raiders, a team that is just completely in turmoil. Oh, I hate him. I hate Coach Pierce with a passion. Oh man, just some of the decisions he made in that Rams game, a winnable game where you're down by 8 points, you're down 8 points and you're in the red zone and it's early in the 4th quarter and your offense hasn't been moving the ball all game long. And you say, let's go for the field goal here. Why not? We'll have another chance to come back down and score a touchdown. You didn't. You end up making it a 5-point game. Good job. You covered. I guess Vegas is good for something, and that's always screwing people over. And I didn't even bet on this game, so I'm not mad. But it's just such a disgusting coaching job. That's what we were talking about. Hey, is Pierce the guy? Clearly, he's not. They're going to need a new coach moving forward. And then just one of the worst quarterback rooms in the entire NFL. I do like some of the talent on the outside of the team, but just very disappointed in the Vegas Raiders so far.
I think that eliminates, our 6 teams that we thought, chalk teams
Easy.
that we can easily eliminate. Now this is where
You're up.
I take my shot in the dark. This is where I put my foot down and tell you I do not believe in this team. And that is a team that has 4 wins, Lewis, who are currently, let me just double check this before I say
I
something
think I know where you're
ridiculous.
going.
That they are currently in the AFC playoffs, but they won't be come week 18. That is the Indianapolis Colts.
Wow.
Now, hear me out here. Just, let me tell you their next 4 games, Lewis.
Okay.
Texans, Vikings, Bills, Jets, Lions. Oh, 5 games. Those are 5
Yeah.
games. I think they lose every single one. Anthony Richardson, we knew he would be raw. But goddamn, a steak that is still like this, the cow is still mooing. That's how raw he is.
Cow's not dead.
You go up, you let the Dolphins go up 10 points in that game, and then they just blow it to the Colts. But just the team was not been impressive. Shane Steichen, he did some great work with Gardner Minshew last year, but it's just not correlated with Anthony Richardson. They get into the red zone, Lewis, and they think, what we're going to do? We're going to do quarterback power run. And I just see Anthony Richardson run into the back of Quentin Nelson and just fall on his ass for a 2-yard gain. And, we're kicking field goals. And so this is just a team who, to me, the eye test is just telling me they are not going to make the playoffs. They just look like a team who's not complete, that, not that great of a defense either. I just think, they would be a team that I'm going to eliminate.
That is a crazy take. And I can't say I disagree with you right now. And considering the Colts are currently in the playoff picture if the season started or the playoffs started today. But Rob, I'm crossing off the team that they just beat, the Miami Dolphins. And
No.
look, I understand your optimism. Tua is coming back this week, and we've just seen how dreadful this offense has looked without him. Clearly, he is extremely valuable to this team, this offense, and their entire program. That's not going to fix the defense. That's not going to fix the special teams. That's not going to fix this offensive line that's been battered. And hell, he did play the first 2 games of the season in which they barely squeaked by Jacksonville and they were getting clobbered by Buffalo. And looking at Miami's schedule going forward, you still have games at Buffalo, at the Rams, who could be getting some guys back, at the Packers, at the Texans, games against the 49ers. And, even if whatever you think about the Jets, they still play the Jets. So there are still some really tough games on this schedule, and I think it's too little too late. And it's not just a Tua problem. They obviously need Tua back, and if he comes back and plays well, it'll be a good thing. But they're just in too big of a hole, and there's too big of holes on this team for me to ignore, Laram. You like
I
that?
mean, you bring up a lot of great points, but the heart and soul of a team is its quarterback. And I think once he steps back onto that field, dons that helmet again without the Guardian cap for some reason, I think is going to uplift the entire rest of the Dolphins organization.
Personal choice.
They're going to go out there and they're going to start playing for their guy. And I expect him to go on a huge run. Now, would I eliminate them before I eliminate the Colts? No, but they are 2-4, and it's going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be tough, but I think they can do it.
All right. Well, that's 8 teams, right? I think
That will be all 8 teams.
I did have another team down, so I'm glad I don't have to mention them. But Arizona is going to be a tough time finding their way into the NFC playoffs. I'll just say that. But good win for them on Monday Night Football. And let's go ahead, Larab, and move on to Week 8 of the NFL season, where we have Thursday Night Football. We have the Minnesota Vikings 2.5-point favorites, shocking low number, traveling to the Rams. Well, the Rams could have some serious help on the way, Larab. It seems like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua could be playing in this game. That is not yet set in stone. But if those 2 guys are back, that obviously raises the ceiling of what this Rams offense could be, especially with how well Kyren Williams has been playing to start the year. He's kind of been carrying the water until the studs come back. So now it's at 3 points. So it keeps on switching back and forth. Who do you like in this game, Laraib?
I'm going to go with Minnesota. Now, is there a world where Minnesota does the same thing defensively to the Rams? Keep on blitzing Matthew Stafford, blitz, 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 and he just tears them apart. That's a most certainly a possibility. But then on the other side, this Rams defense cannot hold a torch to what the Lions are. And I just see Justin Jefferson going out there and just lighten up this defense for 100 yards and a touchdown. You can see Aaron Jones running all over them. I think Sam Darnold can have a masterclass against this Rams team in Las Vegas, or excuse me, in Los Angeles, where not many Rams fans are. And so give me the Vikings in this one.
There are some things to look forward to if you're a Rams fan in this matchup. I do think Matt Stafford is very good against the blitz. I think, finding his guys quickly, moving the ball down the field. I think Kyren Williams has also been very good. And just attacking a blitzing defense, you want to be able to run the ball, and he adds that extra element to this team. And if they get guys like Cooper Kupp and Puka back, they have a successful formula for offense. But even if those guys come back, I don't expect them to be 100% and to play the entire game. So it's definitely going to be an uphill battle on that front. And they still have offensive line injuries that the Vikings defense will be able to exploit. And as for Sam Darnold, Halloween's coming up soon. And so far, so good for Sam. I actually thought he played a really good game against the Lions. I thought he was decisive. I think he made plays. He just couldn't convert those last few first downs, like you mentioned earlier, against the Lions to really seal the game away. But Aaron Jones has been electric, and this Rams defense leaves a lot to be desired. So I'm going with the Vikings here, Thursday Night Football. I'm going to go with the Vikings 26 to Rams 20.
And I'm going to go with the Vikings 27-24. A late Puka Nacua touchdown makes it a lot closer than it looks to be.
All right, Laraib, well, that's going to do it for our Week 7 recap. Thank you for everyone who's made it this far in the video. A lot of stuff to get into that we got into. And then look forward to next week's episode where we're doing our halfway season breakdown, award picks, division picks, Super Bowl picks, a lot of exciting stuff. But as of right now, Laraib, anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I think that's the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.